Hello. So Jeff, we can start?
Yes, we can start.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. So good afternoon to those of you in London. My name is Paul Bowes, and it is my privilege to be currently a Canada-UK Chamber Board Observer. And during my many years living in London, I was also the former co-chair of the Chamber's Financial Services Forum. I'm speaking to you today from Toronto, where I'm the country manager for FTSE Russell London Stock Exchange Group here in Canada. So welcome to you wherever you're logging in, whether it's Canada, the United Kingdom, or elsewhere. I do hope that you, your families, your friends, and your teams remain safe and well in these challenging times. I am very pleased to welcome you to this afternoon's Chamber webinar for end users and investors on buying and owning residential property in Vancouver and British Columbia. In the UK and Canada, we remain in the middle of a pandemic with unemployment rising, especially in sectors such as retail and hospitality, and possibly about to deteriorate considerably more, while they're leaving many out of work. Now, reading articles on the BC real estate sector, there appears to be some disagreement on how the pandemic-related job losses will impact Metro Vancouver real estate. Some think that this is, quote, not a typical recession and that home prices are on an unexpected and swift rebound, as per a new report by the BC Real Estate Association's chief economist. While the pandemic has slammed some parts of the economy, many jobs in higher wage sectors haven't suffered. And indeed, some households have been able to save more than they usually do because they aren't shopping or eating out as much or going on vacation. On the other hand, the Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation's prediction is that declines in household income and employment could mean home prices are headed for a significant and prolonged drop. So I guess we'll have to wait and see if buyer demand can continue, but you don't need to hear this from me. Let's listen to the experts on our panel who will discuss current British Columbia real estate market conditions and real estate opportunities for investors and owner-occupiers. We're going to talk this morning about how they can help non-resident Canadian citizens buy property in the BC, as well as current rental conditions. The panel can discuss how they can help non-resident Canadian citizens, investors, and owner-occupiers manage rental properties in BC, and tax advice on buying and holding rental and other properties in BC as a non-resident of Canada. I'm very pleased to be joined this morning in Vancouver and in Toronto by Mike Stewart, founder at Vancouver New Condos, and Mike will deliver the keynote and moderate today's event. Adam Scarlina from Scarlina Real Estate, Klaus Rode from Your Rental Resource, and Ruby Challen from the International Tax and Realty Division at Trowbridge Professional Corporation. Just to let you know the format of this session, we will hear first from our keynote speaker, Mike Stewart, and then he will moderate the discussion with our three panelists. And after that, we'll take as many questions as we can. We've already had a number sent through in advance, but if you want us to cover a topic, please do use the Q&A facility. We'll aim to wrap this up about 5:30 p.m. UK time, but should you have to drop off early, this session is being recorded and a copy will be available on the Chamber website in due course. You will have seen the extensive bios when registering, so I will not repeat them full in here, but I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Mike Stewart, who is the founder of Vancouver New Condos, which he founded to assist pre-sale condo and existing property buyers and sellers in the Vancouver area, the Fraser Valley, Greater Victoria, Nanaimo, the Okanagan, and the rest of BC. Mike has been a top-producing, award-winning realtor since 2005 and has a bachelor's degree in political science from Simon Fraser University and has lived in Asia and Europe. Briefly, our three panelists today include Adam Scarlina from Scarlina Real Estate. Adam is a Medallion Award-winning realtor, which means he's in the top 10% of realtors in Greater Vancouver. And he prides himself on his client service, marketing strategies, deep local knowledge of the Vancouver real estate market, both the east and west sides. Klaus Rode from Your Rental Resource was until 2013 the associate broker at Bruce Ward Realty, licensed in both trading services and property management. In November 2013, he joined the team at Century 21 in Town Realty and has years of experience in the Vancouver market. And finally, Ruby Chauhan, joining me here in Toronto from the International Tax and Realty Division at Trowbridge Professional Corporation, helps lead their realty tax division, specializing in helping non-residents of Canada navigate tax implications related to ownership of Canadian property. With that, Mike, I will hand it over to yourself.
Hi, sorry about the delay. Sorry, it's my, I apologize. I was just speaking to Ruby. She got a bit delayed. Is this my cue to go? I'm sorry.
Not a problem. Yeah, not a problem, Mike. Yes, you were. It is. The floor is yours, Mike. And okay, I love your photograph in the background.
Thank you very much, Paul, for the kind introduction and synopsis. Real pleasure. Adam, thank you for joining us. Klaus, thank you for joining us. And to Jeff and Nigel, thank you very much for all the gracious help that you've given us and support. I really appreciate it. Also want to wish everyone a warm welcome throughout the world, both in the UK, Europe, Canada, wherever you may be. Welcome and thank you for joining us. So today we're going to, and sorry to be a bit redundant, today we're going to talk about buying and owning residential properties in Vancouver and British Columbia. Now, this is for Canadian citizens who are end users and investors who are non-residents of Canada, okay? And so basically, we're going to discuss the process of buying and owning property in British Columbia. We're going to talk about the process of renting it out if you do decide to rent it before you move in, or if you want to keep it as an investment property. And then we're going to talk about taxation. Now, Ruby Chauhan is joining us. She's a tax specialist, and she'll be discussing that. So just a quick note about what we're not going to be discussing today. So today is designed to, oh, hey, Ruby, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you. So today we're not going to get into minute detail on tax and renting properties and purchasing, because the thing to think about is we're talking about an entire province and we're talking about many varied and different types of property. You know, BC has 5 million people. It's almost 1 million square kilometers. So there's a lot of variety, a lot of variation. If you have any questions that are, you know, a little bit more detailed than what we can cover during this webinar, please reach out to any of us after the podcast, and our contact information will be on the presentation and will also be available on the chamber website. So another thing too about what we're not going to discuss is we're not going to discuss anything to do with non-citizens, non-Canadian citizens purchasing, and that's due to the 20% foreign buyers tax. So we're only going to be talking today about Canadian citizens who can buy in British Columbia, okay? So I'm going to start this discussion with a discussion of current market conditions in British Columbia. It's going to be more focused on the Vancouver area because, you know, Adam and I are Vancouver realtors. But again, like Paul mentioned, we work with a group of people, Vancouver New Condos. We've got a network of about 10 realtors. And again, we cover Greater Vancouver, the Fraser Valley, Southern Vancouver Island. We have colleagues in the Okanagan, and we also have people we work with in Northern British Columbia. So we cover the entire province. We're going to do a survey, but then if you have detailed questions, reach out to us. And if we can't answer those questions, we'll introduce you to people who can answer the specific and detailed questions you have about properties in those areas. Okay. Now, again, like I say, big province, we're going to cover a lot of ground today, but worry not, when we're finished, we're going to be able to, you know, afterwards, we're going to be able to answer your detailed questions, and we're keen to do that. Okay. So so basically first we're going to talk to Adam. He's going to talk about the process of buying properties, either if you decide to visit Vancouver or visit British Columbia, or potentially how to buy properties remotely. After that, we're going to talk to Klaus Rode about, you know, how he finds tenants, how he screens tenants, how the payments go, and that sort of thing. And then also how he supports rental or investors with some of the tax stuff. And then that gives us a great segue to the wonderful Ruby Chauhan, who just joined us. And she's going to answer some questions for us about the taxation issues surrounding purchasing and owning properties as a non-resident Canadian citizen in British Columbia. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to talk about, basically what I'm going to talk about is what happened, what was going going on in the BC economy of COVID, what happened during COVID, what's happening now, and what I think is going to go forward, and then what's happening with certain markets and opportunities. So let's start with what was happening in the British Columbia real estate market before COVID-19. Sorry, I got a little bit behind on my slides here. So basically, before COVID-19 hit, British Columbia has had, as you can see, and continues to have a growing population. People want to live in British Columbia. People want to live in Vancouver. We've had a strong, stable economy with economic growth about 2%, which doesn't sound a lot. It doesn't sound like a high number if you compare it to places like China or other places, but for a mature, advanced industrialized economy, those are quite good numbers. Unemployment prior to COVID-19 was quite low at 4.9%. And was actually trending down. Now, in terms of the real estate market, we saw in late 2019, we saw real estate sales volumes surge across British Columbia with significant gains in terms of sales volumes in British Columbia and whatnot. Now, why was this? Well, because in British Columbia and in Greater Vancouver, the process of building new homes, or the supply of new homes, is a highly politicized process whereby on one side you have people who don't want to see any change in communities. Okay, so you have NIMBYs who don't want to see more density. You have people who are unhappy with the development industry and the making money and making profits on new homes. And so what that's done is it's the politicization of the creation of new homes has just resulted in not enough new homes being built. You can see here, basically since 2015, according to this chart, we're way below, the supply requirements that, this is Greater Vancouver, but I would argue this extends for most places in British Columbia. We're just not building enough housing. We're just not building enough housing. Now, we're also seeing.
Can I interrupt just for a second, Mike?
Yes.
Mike, I apologize to interrupt. We just have a question. Are you sharing your slides, or am I being technologically daft here?
Is everybody seeing the slides that I'm seeing? I'm not sharing my slide. I apologize. I'm so sorry, folks. That was terrible of me. I'm so sorry. I'll get this shared with you right away. Or are you guys seeing the slides? Yes?
I'm
no?
not. Can other? No, Klaus cannot either. No. So I'm afraid we cannot.
I am so sorry. I apologize. I'll get this screen sharing going right away. I apologize, everyone. Bear with me here. So sorry.
Not to worry.
Thank you very much for your patience. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, so here we go.
You can now see the mic.
I'm sorry, I apologize. So there's me, there's my contact information, phone number, email. So here we go. This is what was happening in British Columbia before COVID-19. As you can see, significant population growth, a very steep rise in population growth here in British Columbia. Here we have the chart that's showing the shortfall in new production in new home building, particularly in the Vancouver area, but this extends to many places throughout British Columbia. Now, we also, in terms of increasing demand, so British Columbia's population is changing very much like the rest of the rich industrialized world. If we think back to our grandparents' generation, most of our grandparents lived as family units in single family houses. And when our grandparents would get married, they would move from one family home into a new family home, and people would live in houses together as families. As we all know, society is changing and younger people are deciding to live alone. So what that's doing is it is increasing the demand for individual housing units beyond what beyond what population increases are calling for. So, 40, 50 years ago, you'd have, more people, then we'd need more houses. But now what you're seeing is you get more people, but you're getting more demand for more smaller single occupant units, 1-bedroom studios and that sort of thing. So the demand for housing, the demand for different types of housing is increasing faster than population growth. So a very interesting situation there. So a lot of demand for housing, and somewhat constricted supply. Now, the elephant in the room, what happened during COVID-19 here in British Columbia in terms of real estate? Now, my frame of reference personally is Vancouver, but I've done a survey of what's happening across British Columbia. And basically what we saw is sales volumes went down by about 45% starting in about March of this year, okay? But the interesting thing is across British Columbia, price has remained stable. Okay. Now, unemployment, we also saw a big surge of unemployment, but again, that hasn't had that much impact on real estate prices as so far across British Columbia. Now, why is that? And that's the question that I have is why is this happening? Now, during COVID-19, I worked throughout that time calling people on the phone, not meeting with people because safety first. And that's the most important thing. And, the people that we speak to are people who are qualified to buy and sell real estate. And so the people we were speaking to had the income levels were still working. They were still working from home. So what we saw is that people who were on the lower end of the income spectrum who potentially couldn't afford real estate, you see from the chart on the left, had lost more jobs than those who were higher up in the income. Sorry, I'll just scroll down there. I apologize. Where basically lower income people lost more jobs than higher income and mid-income people, who are the ones who tend to be able to afford real estate in British Columbia, because you do need quite a relatively high income to afford real estate in British Columbia. Now, as you can see on the right-hand side, you can see that the sales volumes went down 45%, but they've come back up, and we're starting to see sales volume. Actually, we're not starting to see. We are seeing sales volumes higher than they were prior to COVID-19. So very interesting situation here. Now, during COVID-19, there were the odd low price sales, panic sales, but those were the exception rather than the rule. Okay. And now we're seeing the bounce back. Okay. So basically for the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver, sales in July 2020 were actually 22.3% higher than sales in July 2019. And now those sales volumes continue to rise. Now, in August 2020, the most recent data we have, sales are up for August 2019 are 36% higher than sales for August 2020 are 36% higher than sales for August 2019. Now, this is a continuation of the rising market that we saw prior to COVID-19 that started in mid-2019 after a soft 2018. Now, why is this happening? Okay, and I would argue this is happening because of massive, here we go. And this is just that employment chart again. But yeah, so basically the reason why we're seeing that is because of massive intervention on the part of the Bank of Canada, on the part of the federal government, and then throughout the world where you have the United States Federal Reserve, you've got the European Central Bank, and then you've got all the major central governments throughout the world putting massive amounts of stimulus into the economy. And basically what that has done in Canada is create a variation on the wealth effect. And what that means is the central bank cuts interest rates dramatically, to the point where you can get a 5-year fixed rate mortgage in Canada for under 2% right now, which is a very, very common thing across the market, but is totally uncommon historically, very, very low rates. And you're also seeing quantitative easing on the part of the Bank of Canada to keep interest rates low for an extended period of time, okay? And then also the massive government spending on the part of the federal government, where we're expecting a deficit of about $343 billion for this year. So massive amounts of money getting pumped into the economy. And what that's done is it has pushed up the value of real estate assets and the stock market. As we've all seen from the stock market and the fantastic performance that we've seen with the stock market over the last 6 months, what that does is it makes those people who hold these assets, be it real estate or stocks, it makes those people feel wealthy. If they feel wealthy, they will continue to spend. If you look back at the chart where we're looking at, who lost their jobs and who kept their jobs, well, the high income people have kept their jobs. Those high income people have assets that are increasing value, so they feel comfortable to continue to spend, which stops or basically precludes the economy from going into a deflationary spiral. So it's all basically a plan on the part of central governments and central banks to reflate the economy with the sort of demand shock caused by COVID-19. And I would argue from the real estate perspective, it has been very, 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 very effective. Now, what's happening right now in the real estate market is a continuation of that rise in volume. We're seeing people who, couldn't buy during the spring and wanted to buy during the spring, or couldn't sell during the spring and wanted to sell during the spring. They're doing that now. So what we saw is COVID-19 did not destroy demand, it deferred demand. It pushed it later on into the year. So we're seeing, extremely high sales volumes now, and they are still increasing. And sales volumes are above 2019 averages and above the 10-year average. Now, for certain property types across the province, we are seeing upward pressure on prices. So, there's a lot of doom and gloom and negativity from certain parts of the media and other places. And here's sort of a chart showing what the Greater Vancouver real estate market's been doing since 1977. It's been fairly consistently upwards. Now, Paul touched on this. The CMHC and Moody's and some other organizations and bodies have made some predictions. And I would argue that their crystal ball is as good as mine or yours. For example, in the CMHC in May 24th, 2020, predicted that sale prices would fall by 18% across Canada in 2020. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to have happened and doesn't seem to be the case. So in terms of going forward with the real estate market here in British Columbia, I would take any prediction you hear from anybody, including the CMHC, including from Moody's, take it with a grain of salt, because again, their crystal balls are as good as yours and as good as mine. So again, take it with a grain of salt. But right now, the real estate market in British Columbia, in Greater Vancouver, is actually very stable and rising at present. So some areas that we like, we'll do a bit of a regional overview. Now, Greater Vancouver is great in the fact that the potential for capital appreciation, as we saw in the chart, this chart above, is fantastic. People who bought in the Vancouver area have done extremely well from a capital appreciation perspective. Now, from a revenue perspective, you're not going to do so well. You'd be lucky to get a gross, annual return of maybe, in terms of revenue, maybe 5%, maybe gross. Okay, so your cap rates for buying properties in Greater Vancouver are much lower, but the capital appreciation is potentially fantastic. Now, the Southern Vancouver Island, very similar in terms of that. Just again, great potential for capital appreciation, but quite low rental revenue. And I would argue the reason why Greater Vancouver and Southern Vancouver Island have this is because you have a lot of people who live in these areas and move to these areas, not because they do it for an economic reason, they do it for a lifestyle reason. And you get a lot of higher income people or high net worth people who move here because they want to live here, not because they're moving here for jobs. Now, the Fraser Valley is very interesting. It's just east of Greater Vancouver. You get relatively high rental revenue, but but relatively less capital appreciation, but still marginally less than Greater Vancouver, but significantly less than Greater Vancouver. So, the buy-ins are much lower. Like, for example, one of our colleagues who works in the Fraser Valley recently sold one of our clients into a property. They paid $283,000 for it. And I think the gross cap rate on it was 6.7%. So, the Fraser Valley offers some very good opportunities for investors and for owner-occupiers, and it's close to Vancouver. Now, the Okanagan, and Klaus can speak to this, he's got a property in the Okanagan, he's done quite well from it, relatively high rental revenue at present, and with big upside, a relatively high rental revenue, but with relatively less potential for capital appreciation. I apologize. Fraser Valley actually does see good capital appreciation. I got a bit confused. I apologize, everybody. I didn't sleep very well last night, so I'm not not at my best. So I apologize and I appreciate your patience. But yeah, so the Okanagan, not as much capital appreciation, but very good revenue. And again, significantly less than Greater Vancouver. Northern British Columbia, relatively high rental revenue at present, and potential for big upside from large-scale natural resource and infrastructure projects. We work with some developers who have a project in Fort St. John associated with a natural gas project, and they've got some furnished rental options that have cap rates that are shockingly high. So in terms of British Columbia, we have options from, you know, very, very high end, very, very expensive to very inexpensive, very simple. Basically, they run the gamut. So there's many, many, many options. But back to Northern British Columbia, you know, less potential for long-term capital appreciation because people are moving to these areas for the project and not to live there for long-term, but you potentially could do very well from the revenue. So yeah, basically, a popular option for clients that we work with overseas are pre-sales or off-plan properties, as they're referred to in the UK and other places in the English-speaking world. They're mostly available in Greater Vancouver, Fraser Valley, Okanagan, Southern Vancouver Island. The nice thing about them is they're very simple and very straightforward. You know, if you're located in London or Western Europe or wherever, buying a pre-sale as a Canadian citizen, non-resident, is a very straightforward, simple process. You know, we'd add you to one of our email lists. We send you an email. You know, you say, hey, I'm interested, then we send you information. And the nice thing is there's tons and tons and tons and tons of documentation on these. So you get floor plans, renderings, preview packages, lots of detail, lots of documentation on trim, finishings, all that sort of stuff. So it's very easy to make an informed decision with a pre-sale remotely. And then, you know, we send you the contracts with DocuSign. Very, very simple, very straightforward. Typically, you're looking at a 20 to 30% deposit, 20 to 30% of the purchase price deposit, payable over 18 to 24 months, and then the balance upon completion. The nice thing about pre-sales is you're buying brand new, so you have the expectation of brand new, perfect, hassle-free finished product with a 2510 government-regulated third-party warranty. So it's not warranted by the developer; it's actually warranted by a third-party warranty company that's overseeing the building of the building, so that they can hedge their bet, so they don't lose on their warranty bet. And the nice thing too is you only need to get a mortgage when it completes. So, you know, depending on when you're moving back to Canada or what's going on in terms of your financing, it could be very good for personal and tax planning and whatnot. Excuse me. Yeah, so basically, and the nice thing too is there's no need to place tenants, there's no need to pay property taxes, depreciation, all that sort of thing for the first little while. We have pre-sale before it completes, and newer tends to be popular with tenants. Now, existing properties in British Columbia tends to be a little bit more labor intensive. We can help you with that. We can get you up to speed with that. Adam and I were talking about it in detail. Existing properties tend to be less expensive than pre-sales. I think a lot of people have the opposite impression, but newer is always more expensive, and used is going to be less expensive. And there's more opportunity to negotiate in terms of price, terms, dates, because you're dealing with individuals who have individual needs and requirements, as opposed to a developer who is a professional negotiator and, you know, typically doesn't negotiate as much. Great thing about buying something that's existing is you can take advantage of those super low sub 2% mortgage rates on a 5-year fixed. And then there's a lot more selection and options available. And then again, you get that rental revenue right away, which is fantastic. And, you know, based on, you know, what, you know, but, you know, the thing is we have options for whatever your investment goal might be in terms of, and also in terms of how much effort you want to put into it. So let's turn into, let's pick Adam Scalina's brains here. This is my business partner, Adam Scalina's contact information. And here's, you can find out more about him here. He's got the Vancouver Real Estate Podcast, which is absolutely fantastic. You guys should all check it out. You absolutely love it. So I'm going to start asking, well, actually, first I should just say, Adam and I have both lived overseas. You lived in Asia, if I understand correctly, right, Adam?
I did, Mike. Actually, I lived in Asia for a couple of years. I also lived in Central and South America. So I'm very familiar with being abroad, and a lot of our clients obviously are international as well.
That's great. That's great. Okay, cool. So we have a great set of tools for buyers. So the first one that we use for both pre-sale buyers and also the buyers of existing properties is a tool called Private Client Services. So tell us a little bit more about private client services.
So private client services, Mike, we've used with our clients now for almost a decade. We helped with the beta testing and development of this research tool. The nice thing about it is you can set parameters for your search geographically. You can look for a specific property type, a price band, and basically you're going to get realtor level information. So you'll get sold prices, days on market. It's all covered in this research tool. It also allows us to communicate with you directly. It's its own portal. Which is really nice. So it's a fantastic place to start, especially if you're abroad and you want to monitor the market and just keep an eye on what properties are selling for.
Yeah, and I guess it'll show new listings 36 to 72 hours, 24 to 36 hours before realtor.ca or rew.ca, I guess, as well, eh?
Exactly. So the nice thing is that it actually avoids the lag that you see on public MLS. So realtor.ca, often it takes a while for listings to populate. So if you use PCS, you see the listings typically before the rest of the market, which is nice.
Fantastic. Another thing I love about PCS is the fact that you can monitor specific addresses, or like you can even monitor specific areas using a Google map within PCS.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, we've also got some pre-sale email lists. Tell us some more about that.
So if you're looking for resources just to monitor the market, we've got our site, VancouverNewCondos.com. It's an index of new construction condos throughout BC. The nice thing is we've worked with these developers in Vancouver and the Greater Vancouver region now for a number of years. So it often results in early access to projects, incentives on projects, and you get to see the projects typically before the rest of the market, or at least information related to the market. So it's a good list to be on. We're also putting out sales ratios and also benchmark price index stats through these mail lists, which is great. So you can kind of monitor what the market's doing on a broad level. You can also look at the specific sub areas and look at if we're in a buyer's market or a seller's market. So we're sending those out on a monthly basis. And the last resource I'll mention is, as you highlighted, Mike, the Vancouver Real Estate Podcast, which I co-host. We've been doing this podcast now for 5 years in the Greater Vancouver area. We've got over 200 hours of content, and we're talking to economists, urban planners, developers, politicians, industry experts. And really, it's just a great resource if you want to just track kind of where the market's going. We were recently featured in the top 10 business podcasts on Apple Podcasts Canada. So it's a great resource if you want to check it out, and you can do that at VancouverRealEstatePodcast.com.
Yeah, and another thing I just wanted to mention too is if you want access to our pre-sale email lists, all you need to do is sign up at VancouverNewCondos.com, or you can go to MikeStewart.ca. Both of those will allow you to join our pre-sale email lists. And our pre-sale email lists, we are broken down. We have them for all the cities in Greater Vancouver. We've got one for the Fraser Valley, Victoria, Nanaimo, the Okanagan, Squamish. So basically very granular and very focused email lists available for that sort of thing. So pretty much for any kind of property here in British Columbia, we can cover your needs. But the best thing is, if you're interested and you need our help or want more information, reach out to us afterwards, either myself or Adam, and we can definitely help you with this. So just a quick question. So let's run us through, okay, so if, say, for example, somebody wanted to buy a property, say, for example, somebody's in London, they wanted to buy an existing property here in British Columbia. What would the process look like? Run us through that.
So we have a lot of internet. It starts often with a phone consultation. We can discuss your areas that you're interested in. We can talk about different areas in Vancouver that might fit your lifestyle. And then, of course, discuss your goals. So if you can't actually be here in person to do property tours, we can arrange for either Zoom tours or accommodate FaceTime tours, which we're doing more often now. If you're looking for pre-construction, most of our pre-sale or pre-construction resources are online. So we have floor plans, models, Matterports, and it's really easy to actually buy off plan just from looking at all the amazing resources that are typically provided by the developer. But we can also walk you through the paperwork, provide a location overview. And what we've been doing recently with our clients is a site visit, so a location visit. So We can FaceTime you from the site of the building that will be built, and give you a better sense of the surrounding area.
Yeah, that's great. And then also for existing properties, I've done this, we've both done this, particularly with clients in Europe and overseas is, get you set up on PCS, do the consultation, get you set up on PCS, start the conversation. And then if somebody wants to fly into Vancouver or come visit us in Vancouver, of course, when the COVID restrictions are over, because safety first, we can get you up to speed so you know exactly what's happening in the market in terms of sale prices, new listings, all that stuff. So when you do arrive, we can hit the ground running and make really good, efficient use of your time. Wonderful. Well, hey, Adam, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. On to the next person. Klaus, how are you?
Good. How are you doing? Can you hear me? Had to unmute myself.
Exactly. So Klaus is both a realtor, but he also specializes in rentals. And has helped many of our clients with rentals and has done a fantastic job, both Adam and I, and we really like working with Klaus. So I guess, what's happening with the rental market across BC?
Yeah, well, just to sort of get back to your point about the cap rates. I mean, we've seen that cap rates are between 3% and 5% in most markets right now. Places like Kelowna, Prince George may have a slightly lower rent, but you're also purchasing for less dollars, so your cap rates tend to be much higher. Right. And overall, right now, I think we're seeing that the further away you get from Vancouver, the higher the cap rates are. Okay. And in Vancouver, I mean, the rents for one bedrooms have settled somewhere around $2,000 right now, depending on neighborhood. And your cap rate then will depend on what the actual selling price is, just based on location, view, that sort of thing.
Got it. Okay. So what's been the impact of COVID-19 on rentals across BC?
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. At the beginning, nobody really knew what was going to happen. It's the brakes sort of hit right when everything shut down in March. I was actually working out in Vancouver at the time. And we saw a lot of the furnished accommodations started to flood the market. Airbnb bookings obviously canceled with the travel restrictions. So everything tried to transfer to longer term rentals. And then some of the furnished rentals ended up going unfurnished, flooding the market a little bit on that end. Most of what we saw was the decrease in prices for 2-bedroom suites. Places where we used to get $3,400 to $3,600 a month went down to about $2,400 to $3,200, depending on location and size of the place. Wow. 1-bedrooms though were very stable the entire time, and they've settled between $1,900 to $2,100, depending on location. And most of that is we saw a lot of people that were renting 2 bedrooms prior that no longer wanted to live with roommates and then ended up taking their own 1-bedroom suite. So I think that drove a lot of the initial demand. And then in about May and June, when Microsoft and Amazon started to pick up some of their corporate transfers again, we saw another increase in demand for 1-bedrooms. So that's been pretty stable.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting how, there's not necessarily a connection between the price of those properties and what's going on with the rentals. Really interesting. Yeah, interesting. Okay, cool. So if a NOS resident was to buy a property here in BC and wants to rent it out, what are the next steps in terms of working with you?
Yeah, I mean, contact us. We can talk about the property that you're interested in. We can talk about the pricing and the fees that we charge. You can email me, klaus@klausrowe.ca. We can set up either anything by email. We can do a Zoom call, phone call, whatever works best for you.
Okay. And also, Adam and I work closely with Klaus, so we can connect you with Klaus, and we work with Klaus, so we're very closely with Klaus and work very well. How do you screen tenants? That's I always find interesting.
Yeah, we've streamlined the process quite a bit with COVID. So we've struck up a partnership with live.rent. So the tenants go onto that site first to apply for the rental. That way we can screen whether or not they're qualified for the rental and whether that would work. And then after that, we would set up an in-person viewing if necessary. We also do the 360-degree virtual tours for places that are vacant. And that's really helped sort of get away from doing in-person showings just to keep everyone safe. And then once we've gone through that process and signed the lease via DocuSign, everything is done virtually. Then we set our tenants up on the payment platform, Rent Moolah, and that gives them the ability to pay online with various different sources. They can use their bank accounts, credit cards, loans, whatever.
Love it. Oh, and sorry, just to digress. In terms of sales, we use DocuSign as well. So if you're purchasing from overseas, we can use DocuSign to make it a very smooth, simple process, just like Close does with the rentals. What system do you use to collect and disperse rents?
Yeah, so for the collection of rents, that's Rent Moolah, and we've had a partnership with them for the last 5-6 years now. They're offering many different platforms for the tenants to be able to pay, including you can walk into Walmart or 7-Eleven now, and with your barcode, give that to the attendant, and they can collect the money and pay your rent for you. We can do credit card payments and through the bank account as well. So it's pretty neat for the tenants to use. The platform also allows them to collect points, which they can then use later on for their discounts on various stores and partner sites. And then for us on the back end, we use Yardi, which is our accounting software. So we keep track of the monies coming in, coming out. There's an owner portal set up for all of the owners, and they can log in at any time to look at the history of their owner statements as well. So it's pretty convenient for most people.
I love it. So basically, we could help somebody buy a property here in British Columbia. You, or if it's not an area you cover, a colleague of yours who does something similar, can get our clients set up with this. So it's a hassle-free, you take care of finding tenants. If there's any issues with the tenants, you take care of it. If the tenants leave, you help get new ones. Basically, the owner doesn't do anything and you take care of everything. Is
exactly
pretty much correct? Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
Great. Because we've had that experience working with you, and we've been very happy, and our clients have been very happy, most importantly. So that's great. So the last question, and this actually segues into speaking to Ruby, is do non-resident property owners need a bank account here in Canada for their rental income?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we recommend having a Canadian bank account for the rental income. Just for one, it's easier for us to deposit the funds. We do electronic transfer, so it has to be a Canadian bank account. And secondly, the owners will have to do their payments for property taxes or strata fees. And this way, with a Canadian bank account, they can set up automated payments to their strata, the company that runs the building. So it's a very convenient process that way.
That's great. And then do you help with BC Canadian tax on rental income? Sorry, this is the segue to Ruby.
Yes, exactly. So yes, we do keep 25% of the gross income and submit that to CRA. At the end of the tax year, the owners would get their NR4 slip to file their taxes on the Canadian income. You can file for an NR6 form to lessen the amount of money that we have to submit to CRA. And I think that would be the perfect segue into Ruby, because she can talk about the taxes on that end.
Fantastic. Very excited to talk to Ruby. She's our tax superstar here. I know Klaus and Adam very well. We chat all the time, but we've got Ruby here, who's really special because she's a tax specialist on this stuff. When I spoke to her, I found it really interesting. I think you're going to love it. Here's Ruby's contact information. So let's get right into it with Ruby. Do non-residents who own property and collect rent in British Columbia need a bank account? So does this have okay, sorry, we already answered that question, but this is from a tax perspective. So it's the same question, but for a different purpose. Does this have an impact on their non-resident status from a tax perspective? And again, this is for Canadian citizens. Take it away, Ruby.
Thank you. So this is a good question that I come across often. And the fact is that if you own a property in Canada, you will likely require a Canadian bank account to collect rent, pay bills, etc. And from a tax residency perspective, it's considered a secondary tie. And when we want to talk about tax residency specifically, it's very case by case because it depends on so many different things, intentions, facts, where your partner may live, and economic ties, family ties, etc. So if you have concerns about your residency status, we recommend giving us a call and talking to us about your situation specifically.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. And again, folks, we're going to be covering generalities here. If you have specific, questions, we'd love to answer them. We're keen to answer them. Just reach out to us. Ruby's contact information here is above, and, Jeff and Nigel at the board can give it to us. And again, it's going to be on all of our websites. So, reach out to us. So the next one is, what taxes are payable on the purchase of a property in British Columbia as a non-resident of Canada or someone abroad, even if they're a Canadian citizen?
So there is something everyone refers to as the foreign buyer's tax. It's called the additional property transfer tax for foreign entities and taxable trustees. And the 2020 rate and beyond currently is at 20% of the fair market value for your proportionate share of ownership of the property. The main item to note about this additional property transfer tax is that it's based on immigration status versus tax residency status. So essentially, if you're a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident and you live anywhere in the world, you will not be subject to the tax. And a main item to note is it's really important you work with a well-informed real estate lawyer, because at the time of closing, they are the ones who are registering this tax. And normally, if you are eligible for a refund, for example, if you become a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident within 1 year, and you also live in the property as your principal residence, usually the lawyer will assist you with that refund. We can also assist as well.
And we've got lots of great lawyer referrals. So if you guys need that, we can definitely help. And Ruby does too. So we can definitely help. Okay, so the next one. So can you tell us about the City of Vancouver's empty homes tax?
Absolutely. So this is a localized tax. It's issued by the City of Vancouver on a municipal level. And the purpose of this tax is to help Vancouver have more available housing for its residents so that they don't stay empty in Vancouver. And the tax rate is 1.25 of the property value. So for example, if your property is $1 million, assessed at $1 million, you're paying about $12,500 per year. The main item to note, because nobody wants to pay extra taxes when we don't have to, is you want to have the property occupied for 6 months or more. So a long-term lease in place, that would be wonderful. Or for example, if it's a principal residence, you end up moving back to Canada, and there may be also other exemptions available as well.
Okay, great. And then, so can you tell us about the British Columbia speculation tax? This is one that I've still confuses me somewhat.
Yeah, so it's very similar to the empty homes tax. It's a secondary similar to the empty homes tax on top of the empty homes tax. So the rate for this is 2% for foreign owners and satellite families. When they say satellite families, they're referring to those including Canadian citizens who have moved overseas but don't pay tax in Canada. And the purpose of this tax, again, is to provide more housing to British Columbia and for foreign owners to contribute to the tax system. And similar to the empty homes tax, a declaration must be made annually.
And then how does it work for a non-resident paying taxes on rental revenue on a property here in BC?
Absolutely. So this is something I talk about every single day with every single person that calls me, because it's the main concern. As we know, if you're overseas, you're usually not paying any tax in Canada. But when you start earning Canadian income, whether it's rental or any other sort of income, there has to be tax paid on it. So the way the CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, which is the taxing authority of Canada, works is that for non-residents earning rental income, they have tax withholding and filing requirements. Essentially, they want non-residents to withhold tax in advance in case you don't end up reporting your rental income and paying it. The way it works is there's a few different divisions that come into play for non-residents. There's a division called Part 13 and non-resident tax. They want to ensure that you withhold tax. They give you two options. The first option is the default option, which Klaus mentioned in his firm handles. This is also broken down to 3 parts. Part 1, you're withholding 25% of the gross rent on a monthly basis. Part 2, once the year is over, you receive something called an NR4 slip. It's a non-resident tax slip. It indicates the amount of tax you withheld under a non-resident account. And then when you withhold 25% of the gross rent, the CRA gives you up to 2 years to file your tax return. It's a specific tax return called Section 216 non-resident return, only reporting rental income and rental expenses. And also, I find that most people, they prefer the second option, the net method, compared to the gross method, because 25% of your monthly rental income can be a lot on your cash flow. So the second option is called the net method, the NR6 form method. Essentially, you must have a third party, such as Trowbridge Professional Corporation, who's registered with the CRA to withhold tax on your behalf. And with the NR6 form, it allows you to pay reduced tax withholdings based on your estimated net income. So as you can imagine, if you're estimating $0 in net income, you can end up paying $0 in tax upfront to the CRA. It's broken down to 3 parts as well. Part 1, NR6 form is submitted as early as possible. You pay the reduced tax withholdings. Then once the year is over, you receive an NR4 slip, similar to the gross method. And then the CRA, this is where it becomes a little bit different. They have a very, very, very strict tax filing deadline of June 30th of the following year. And if you fail to file your tax return declaring your rental income, your Canadian agent who's registered with the CRA, such as Trowbridge, would receive an assessment penalty of 25% of the gross rent for failing to file your tax return. So it's really important that, you know, everything is done in a timely fashion, payments are made in a timely fashion, and we have the system set up very well in-house for Trowbridge, where we handle everything comprehensively.
Love it. That's great. That's really good. Thank you. So what kind of rental expenses are deductible if you're a non-resident and you own a rental property here?
Yeah, so the great thing is almost everything. Property taxes, maintenance fees, leasing fees. One of the largest expense rental property owners have is mortgage interest. And I find that non-residents prefer to take out as large of a mortgage as possible, so they have more cash flow available, and so that they're writing off the mortgage interest portion. The only rental expense, depending on how many properties you might have, is travel and vehicle expenses.
Love it. This is fantastic. Thank you. So let's talk, and I know we're talking about buying, but let's just talk about selling a property, because there's a really interesting tax that I think everybody should know about. So let's talk about selling property in BC. Can you tell us about the 25% non-resident withholding tax on the sale of a property in Canada?
Absolutely, and this applies to BC and all of Canada. So selling property as a non-resident is a little bit different than selling as a resident. As a non-resident, the CRA has something called a Certificate of Compliance S116 requirement. Essentially, within 10 days of the final closing, you're required to submit a Certificate of Compliance application. It calculates 25% of your net capital gain, if any. At the same time, your lawyer is required to hold in trust 25% of the gross proceeds. So for example, if you're selling your property for $1 million, 250,000 will be held in trust. We don't want your lawyer to send that money to the CRA because it can take some time to get back from CRA. At the same time, the CRA is processing your Certificate of Compliance application. They will request a payment of 25% of the net capital gain, which will match our application that we prepare. That payment is made from the money your lawyer is holding in trust. Then once the CRA issues the certificates, the lawyer can release the remaining funds back to you. I think the main concern for non-residents selling property is just that the funds are held by your lawyer potentially for about 12 to 16 weeks until CRA issues that certificate. Then the following year, you're required to prepare a Canadian tax return to report the sale and selling related expenses, which helps lower your capital gain even further, so you're paying less tax. And on that tax return, only 50% of your net capital gain is taxable. So you usually receive a pretty good refund at that point when that return is assessed.
Love it.
Yes.
Pure gold. Thank you very much, Ruby. Really appreciate it. I was excited to hear from you, and this is fantastic. This is great. So we've got some, so thank you very much, everybody. This has been wonderful. We've got some questions to go through. So the first one is from a gentleman by the name of Peter Mack. He's a Canadian residing in Hong Kong for over 40 years. He's non-resident, and he wished to buy an apartment and would like to know the tax to be paid at the time of buying the property. So Ruby, could you just give us a quick rundown on that one for us? I know it's a simple one, but let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, it depends if you're a Canadian citizen or not. If you're a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, then you don't have to worry about paying any extra tax related to the additional transfer tax for foreign entities. At that point, the main concern, which your realtor can discuss with you, is paying tax on the transfer, land transfer tax. And otherwise, if you decide to rent the property, I say give me a call and let's discuss how to withhold tax moving forward.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, if it's a new property, there's 5% goods and services tax. And then if it's not a new property, it's the property transfer tax, which is 1% on the first 100,000, 2% on the balance, and then 3% above $2 million. And then basically that's it. So fairly simple, straightforward process if you're a Canadian citizen. But again, we're not really getting into non-Canadian citizen stuff. Now, Bernard had a really interesting question. And this is a simple one. It's kind of outside of our bailiwick, but I do know the answer to this because I work with mortgage brokers. And I think for the next one, we're going to get a mortgage broker in to discuss. And that is, how can I lock up the current low mortgage rate if I'm purchasing a pre-sale? Well, we work with a lot of banks and mortgage brokers, and the banks that finance a development project or a pre-sale project will often offer a rate hold on a pre-sale that you buy. Now, that rate hold will typically be about 1% or one full percent above what existing rates are at the present moment. But the nice thing is it's a guarantee, and they'll typically guarantee it by about 3 to 4 years. But the good news is if at the completion date, the prevailing interest rates are lower than what you had your rate lock at, they'll give you that lower rate. So very common. And, if you have any questions on that, I can definitely help out with that. Now, Ruby, there's one from an anonymous person. Ruby, I left Vancouver in 2001, began renting out my home, was told by an accountant not to sell my home until I returned to Vancouver, which I plan to do in 5 years. Do you want to address that one, or is that something that should be addressed directly afterwards?
I will address some of it because it's really specific to your scenario, and there's a number of different forms and elections that can be filed, whether you're moving from Canada and turning your property into a rental property, or you bought a rental property and you move back to Canada and you live in the property. Tax-wise, if you're selling as a non-resident, the tax you're paying on capital gains is pretty similar to how much you're paying as a resident of Canada as well. It really depends are they going to be living in the property as a principal residence? Did they live in the property as a principal residence before? Because capital gains is calculated in a number of manners. And if the property was your principal residence, depending on if an election was filed or not, you could potentially defer capital gains for an additional year. You could have a principal residence exemption. So there's a number of items to discuss in that scenario.
Okay, cool. There's another one about speculation and vacancy tax, part of the deductibles on capital gain upon sale. I think the scope of this question is maybe a bit beyond what we're going to discuss now. Perhaps you could, for this question, it's from an anonymous attendee, so I don't know who it is, but Ruby is the speculation vacancy tax, part of the deductibles on capital gain upon sale. I think that one is a bit beyond the scope of what we're going to discuss today. So definitely reach out to Ruby and she can help you with that afterwards. Now, again, Ruby's got all the questions. She's our superstar here. What tax complication if we'd like to buy a second home from the USA? Again, that's a bit too broad, and that's from Sam McConney. Again, go ahead, sorry, Ruby.
I would like to, so also at Trowbridge Professional Corporation, we have a dedicated US tax division. So we can help on both sides. If you want to invest in Canada, if you want to invest in US, if you're living in US and you want to invest in BC, so definitely get in touch with us on that. We can help on both sides.
Yeah, again, I think, that sort of thing I think would be, contact Ruby afterwards. How can I file the rental income tax overseas? Again, Bernard, reach out to Ruby. She can help you with this afterwards. This is going to be a good one. And then we've got one from Antonio. Is there going to be a presentation conference regarding non-resident, non-Canadian citizens that want to buy a property? Also, what happens if an international student in BC wants to buy a property when and after it is studies? You know what? We're probably not going to do something on that, but feel free to reach out to me and we'll see what we can do. We can discuss that further. but probably not going to do that. There was also a question about whether or not there's going to be a recording of this. And if I understand, Jeff and Nigel are recording this. And for the people who signed up on our email lists, we'll be sending this out. Yeah, there was some other questions we had from before the webinar, but I think they're beyond the scope of what we're going to discuss today. With those questions, for all those people who've asked questions that we haven't been able to address, feel free to reach out to any of us. Our contact information is going to be on the Chamber website. It's on our websites, and it's on this package, which will be on Vancouver New Condos and MikeStewart.ca. So I think we're going to wrap up.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Mike. That is excellent. And indeed, as you said, not only is this recorded, but Jeff kindly put all of your email addresses in the chat box on this particular presentation. We may have promised to everyone on this call that we would try to wrap up at 5:30. It's 5:31. I won't keep you much longer. I just wanted to thank, on behalf of all the attendees, Mike, yourself, Adam, Klaus, and Ruby. This has been extremely interesting. Vancouver is one of the most beautiful cities in the world, and I'm saying that as an Ontario boy who lived in Europe. So thank you so much for your time. On behalf of the Chamber, please keep track of upcoming events. On the 8th of October, a financial services forum invested in tomorrow with Neil Cunningham, President and CEO of PSP Investments. The 15th of October, we're going to be discussing managing your business across international borders in the time of COVID. Look, in the interest of time, if you do have future suggestions, I know on the questions, some suggestions were made, please reach out to Nigel, Jeff, or Victoria about future ideas. We're always looking for great ideas. And with that, we will bring this webinar to a close. Thank you, Mike, and your colleagues so much. And I hope everyone has a safe rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Take care. Stay safe.
Take care.
Thank you.